Welcome to a first training movie of Roboflow9. In this movie, I'm going to try to show you how to work with the new type of workflows and also talking about some new ways of building workflows. Roboflow has been integrated, built into the web server console. That means on one hand, Roboflow still is the standalone application that can run as a service or as a daemon, but it now has an interface built into the server console. If you installed Roboflow and you installed the server console, you can connect to it. Now you will notice that at this point, if you click on Roboflow, that it doesn't find it. There can be two reasons why it doesn't find it. It is looking by default on the current computer where Tomcat is installed, from where you are running the server console. So it could be that Roboflow is installed on that same computer. If that is the case, you have to check if the service is running. In this example, I stopped the service to be able to show this. If I start the service, then when I try again, it will find Roboflow. Mind you that if you start Roboflow, there's a delay of 30 seconds in it, so it can take 30 seconds or a little bit more before the service is actually running. If Roboflow is not running on the same computer, you can type in the IP address of the server to connect to. It will talk from this web interface to the Roboflow backend. Let me check if the service is started. It's started. So now if I click on connect again, it will find it. If this is first use of Roboflow, you will of course not have any workflows listed here, and it will also pop up with a message saying there's an error connecting to Cumulus. Roboflow, the backend, will try to open a connection with Cumulus, and if you try to create a workflow, it will give you this kind of error that it failed to connect. That's why the very first thing to do is go to the global settings and set up your connection to Cumulus. Where is your Cumulus server? You can add the IP address, or if it's on the same server as Roboflow, then you can specify localhost, a username. In this case, I'm going to use the Cumulus administrator, and a password if any. Roboflow notifies via email about errors or actions within a workflow, so it's a good idea to configure a mail server, the IP address. You can prefix it with TLS/ if it's a TLS protocol. You can add the port number at the end with colon, for instance, 25. But 25 is the default, so it doesn't need to be mentioned. If it's SSL, you can prefix it with SSL/ and then the IP address or the DNS name to the mail server. Again, colon with a port number, if not the standard 25. So if I quickly do that now, you can see that the number of the parameters are listed here. So if I quickly add my local mail server, I will be able to send mail. And you can define an email address that is notified whenever something is going wrong. Now we are ready to create a new workflow. If I click on create workflow, then I get the opportunity to type in a name, and I'm going to say hot folder new files. The name must be unique, so if you type in a name that already exists, you will get an error message when you click on OK. And then you have the choice either to go for the existing workflows, what we call the pre-built workflows that exists from Cumulus 8 and from even before that time. You can still use them, but if you start building a workflow from scratch, we advise you to use the new style of building workflows, because it offers you much more flexibility and control over the different steps you are or actions you are doing inside your workflow. I'm going to create a hot folder workflow which is going to process some new files, and I'm here deciding that this is the type of workflow I need: process newly dropped files in hot folder. And I'm just clicking on OK. As you can see, if you are familiar with the previous versions, you still have the name, the workflow type, and every new type of workflow will have template in the name, while the old Cumulus 8 workflows will not have that. The interval is exactly the same as it was before. You can set a time interval in a number of seconds or a fixed date in time, or I'm going to set, in this example, it on a run on demand, which means I can kick it off manually whenever I need it. This workflow is going to have a hot folder where I'm going to drop the files, and let's see, I'm going to put this inside my workflow. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it drop folder. And then I'm selecting this folder. I can set a file filter. I can set a notification if a file is processed. But most of the functionalities are now for you to add to this workflow. In other hot folder workflows, you had a bunch of pre-built functionalities in there. This workflow gives you complete control over what you want to do with these files, but you have to add them yourself. Let's suppose for a moment that we are going to copy this file to a new location and then catalog it from that new location into a Cumulus catalog. The very first thing I want to do is, in that case, add an action, and I'm going to open a Cumulus catalog. So I'm going to add a new action, look for the group of actions which are called anything to do with Cumulus catalog, and I'm looking for open catalog. The catalog name in which I want to catalog is, for instance, the sample catalog, and I can give it any name I like, and open Cumulus sample catalog. Every action gives you the opportunity to add your own comment. By doing so, this comment will appear here in this right column and can help you a lot when you come back to this workflow to understand the different steps, the different actions that are taken. So I suggest, or I advise, to always add as much help information for yourself in the different steps of this workflow. The next thing is that we are going to now process a file that comes in. Every file that is dropped in the folder will be processed in this action script. So the next step is that I want to copy this file to a new location. So I have to create that new location. So I need a file folder action which will store a path that I'm going to select as a folder, because I need a folder to connect, to copy this file to. We try in these actions to have as minimal as possible things to type in, so every object that is created is automatically available in the workflow, so that it avoids any tasks, that it avoids any problems in syntax. So the type of action that I'm going to create here is create folder. If it doesn't exist, well, we just create it, so that's not really necessary. I can say store the path that we typed in or selected and store it as a folder. The output variable is whatever you like to call it, and I'm going to call it target folder. And I store folder target folder. The next thing is that I want to copy the file to that location. So I'm looking for file folder actions, copy move of a file. And notice that I don't have to know which file. I'm saying this is a file and it's called hot, and the target folder is that. I can change the file name if I like, but I'm not going to do this, so I leave it blank, and then I tell it either to move the file or copy the file. Default functionality of a hot folder workflow is that it processes the file and then it deletes it at the end from the drop folder. So there's no need to move it here. It will be deleted at the end of the process. And then I can call it copied file. Any object created in the workflow of the same type will appear in this drop down. That is why you already had this copied file in here. A little bit premature, but it will be created here in this in this action. So I'm saying copy hot file to the target folder. And after copying it, now comes the time to catalog it. So now I say conditional, no, I need a Cumulus catalog instruction. The Cumulus catalog instruction is called catalog a file. And which file? Well, I'm not going to catalog the hot file, I'm going to catalog the copied file. And which catalog do I want? Well, he knows that I have at this point one catalog in my open in my workflow, which has the tag, the name, my catalog. Asset handling set and permission template are very important. These two are needed for the cataloging process, so make sure that you have created a proper asset handling set and a proper permission template up front. I usually do this with the Roboflow user. Could be the Cumulus administrator if you're running it as the Cumulus administrator, or a separate Roboflow user that runs Roboflow. And then I always suggest not to share them, these asset handling sets and permission templates. That way you avoid anybody else changing them and changing the behavior of a workflow. Then the record, I can call new record catalog copied file. And finally, after doing that, I just can say I have to close the catalog. Which catalog? Well, the catalog that I opened earlier on in the workflow. This is how quickly and simply you can build a workflow. I can just say OK. Now there is of course the possibility to build into this workflow much more security. this workflow will act exactly the same way as previously Cumulus 8 workflows would work. That means you open the catalog and then it copies the file. Actually, it first copies the file in the original. It then tries to catalog the file. But what if opening the catalog fails? Maybe you want the file to stay in the hot folder and not be deleted. Or, well, now you have the ability to add extra tests, extra functionality in here. I can go to conditional, and in conditional I can say test if the result exists. That means I want to know if I'm opening catalog, I want to know if this object exists, and I have to tell it which object it is, and it is a Cumulus catalog. And I say test if catalog is open. That way you are sure that the catalog is open. If not, you can send an email, say, hey, the catalog is not open, etc., etc. What you have to do is you can cut an instruction, and if you open the triangle and paste it, it will put it inside. And then I can cut, and I take the last instruction and I can put it inside. And I can cut, and I can select the last instruction and I can paste it inside. Cut, paste. That's how you can be certain that your process was running properly. If the opening of the catalog failed, well, then there was no point in going any further. If the catalog fails, cataloging fails, then open the catalog failed, then you should probably not try to copy it to another location and afterwards try to catalog it because all this will fail. The if test has also an else. You can now say I have performed an if test, and I can say if, and then there's an if test else, like in a normal if then else instruction. You can select the test you did, and if this was false, then this will be true, and it will execute this part of the instruction. And what I can do here is I can create a text message. So I can go here and I can say text, and for this text I can say I want to store a text, and the text I want to store is error message. And the error message is going to be fail to open the sample catalog. And so store text, fail to open sample catalog. And then afterwards I can send an email. I can send an email, so that's a notification. The notification is going to be, I can write to the log file, I can send an email. So email to peter@localhost, and the mail subject is failed to open sample catalog. And I hot folder new files, failed to open. So instead of waiting for the workflow to run into an error, you can trap it yourself, and you can send error mail with error message. So this will prevent the workflow from running into an error, it will fail to open the catalog, and then it will notify somebody about that problem. There is one last thing to cover, and that is the fact that if it fails, still the default behavior of this workflow is to delete the hot file. So the file that was dropped in and it was not processed because the catalog is not available will by default be deleted. There is a way around that. If you run into this else procedure, if there was an error, you can store a special variable telling the workflow that it is failed, that it has failed. So what I usually do is I go here and I go to notification, and in case of such an error I also write something to the log, and then I have the ability here to say open catalog failed, so not deleting hot file. That in itself doesn't do anything. The trick is here I have to say store tag. This is one of the very few times that you have to use so hot folder delete file, and I'm saying false. And so this is one of the very few times that you have to use this particular functionality, this inline scripting. And so you will see in some examples that we will use the simple tag to get a variable that was created in another part, but other than that the other instructions are obsolete. This is one example because we are doing a hidden feature here. We are storing a boolean value saying that the hot folder delete file procedure doesn't have to happen or shouldn't happen because we did not process the file. And so right next to log, and I'm going to say here colon like that. So, and that way now we can be certain that we have a nice extra text information in our log saying that this file was not processed. Now I would say that we could also add here this one, and you could say that you picked up the file name here, for instance, of the hot file. If I just put tag hot, it will return the whole file. So if I say it like this, it will add that information to the log. So that's an example of using the tag, which is just saying I have an object somewhere in my workflow that I want to use somewhere else. Usually this is only used for text. I'm here doing it as an example for the file itself. Don't forget to save, don't forget to click OK, because any changes are not written back to the Roboflow backend until you clicked here on the OK button. If you made a mistake in the order of which you want to process these things, you can say cut, I don't want this, I select here paste, and it just changes the order. If you want to duplicate, you can say just copy, click where you want to copy it to and say paste, and now I have it twice. If you want to remove a line, you can just say cut and it will remove that individual line. If you want to edit, you can double click or click on the edit button. And again, If you want help about the complete workflow functionality, you can find it here. If you want help about the actions, the scripting, etc., about the workflow templates and what they do, about the pre-built workflows that exist, you will notice also here at the bottom, if you make your window a little bit bigger, that you can have other help parts available. But that would bring us too far off our purpose here. So we built the workflow, we built in the safety catch, and now I can just say OK and run it. Thank you for joining this training movie. See you later.